This is a show where my dad and I talk about work and how to enjoy it, and we also provide a weekly housing market update and provide a quick answer to common mortgage questions. Please enjoy the Dirty Troughs Podcast from Cleveland Street Mortgage. All right, welcome back to the Dirty Troughs Podcast. Thanks for listening. My name is Landon and Butaud, and this is my dad, Chris. This week we are going to tackle a question talking about the challenges of working from home and how to overcome those and make them positives of working in a home environment. And we're going to start with this week's housing market update. So I'm going to turn that over to you, Dad. What do you have for us this week?
Really kind of the big deal this week is rates came way down. Rates came way up, and particularly if you're a first-time home buyer, this might be a good time for you to jump back in to revisit, with your mortgage professional, with your realtor, because two things happen. One is, we got some inflation numbers that were much better than feared, and that gave the market the sense that rates might be coming down, that the Fed might, be able to pull back a little bit from their aggressive posturing to get inflation under control, and that caused interest rates to or to drop significantly. And then the other thing that, coincidentally, the Fannie Mae lowered the pricing for first-time home buyers. There's a technicality. The way they did that is they essentially eliminated what they call loan level price adjustments. And basically, if Fannie starts with a base rate for a single-family residence, someone with perfect credit, 20% down, and then anytime you're off of that mark, let's say you're putting less than 20% down, or it's not a single family, it's a condo, or you don't have perfect credit, they're increasing the pricing for each one of those. And it's cumulative. And so if you're buying a condo and you don't have perfect credit and you're putting 3% down, it can be an interest rate that's very much higher than the going rate would be if you did put 20% down. And they wiped out all of those adjustments, basically saying these are adjustments that impact first-time home buyers more than anybody else, and we want to help them get in the market. So it's a good time to look at that again.
So rates down for in general, and especially even more improved pricing for that kind of first-time home buyer situation where most people tend to be in. If you're putting 3% down, a little lower credit maybe, and maybe considering a condo, the pricing adjustments were moved on those.
Right.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'm going to set our timer for our mortgage question of the day, because we can go long on these. Okay. It's easy too, but we're going to try and keep it.
I have not been prepared with the question.
So I'm gonna,
spontaneity is highly valued here. So
going to ask him on the spot, which should be an easy one, I think. And if you get bored, it'll be 3 minutes, or if you get lost, it'll be 3 minutes, so you can skip past these 3 minutes. But the question is, if you have someone who's a homeowner right now and they are looking at buying, start a timer. They're looking at buying, and they're considering keeping their home. Instead of selling in order to buy their new home, keeping it, maybe renting it out. So we've touched on before in some videos the debt to income ratio and how that can be a limiting factor. Generally speaking, that's one of the main limiting factors in terms of what you can qualify for, in terms of what kind of a loan you get. Your overall debt can't be more than 50% of the income that your underwriters deem as usable.
Right.
Is that general description?
Generally true for Fannie Freddie programs, yes.
Okay. So, there's obviously exceptions, but as a general rule.
That's a good general rule.
And so if that's the case, and you're looking at keeping a house that you have a mortgage on and buying a new house, how does that debt to income ratio then factor in?
Yeah, so it does. So that's kind of the short answer for that is it does.
Like, is there a combined debt to income ratio, or?
Well, what they're doing is debts are like if you have a car payment or student loan payments. Of course, that's easy to calculate, right? It's however $100 a month you're making on that payment gets included in your debts. But on a piece of property that you own, that's not the subject property. So the subject property is the property that is the subject of the mortgage you're being underwritten for.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, you're buying a new place. The subject property has its own.
Let's say Woodinville, Washington is the new property.
Yeah.
And Duval is the old property.
Yeah. And so you're on Woodinville, of course, you're going to have your principal and interest on your mortgage, your taxes, your homeowner's insurance, and all that's going to factor into your debts. But then the departing residence that you're leaving
in Duval
also has all of those things as well. That's right. And so So, the ideal situation is, and this is not everybody for sure, is where you can qualify carrying that departing property as just dead weight, right? No income offset. So that's the ideal situation where you don't need to have a renter in that property. You don't have to have a rental agreement.
In order to qualify.
Right, in order to qualify, because then that's, then it's simple. It's just, you're buying a new house, that's one of your debts, but you have enough income to qualify, so you just show them your mortgage statement that shows all the, the taxes and insurance and principal and interest, and that gets added in and you're fine.
So are you saying there may be then scenarios where your usable income can include rent from your previous property?
Yes, and so that's a situation that's more likely for a lot of people, as most people can't afford to carry two properties dead weight, and so then you typically have to have a rental agreement signed and a security deposit deposited.
Okay. In order to use that income.
In order to use that income, and then that income is an offset against that mortgage payment.
So if you have that situation where you're looking at buying, you just have to start lining, and you needed that income to qualify. You just have to start lining up your renters, get that all taken care of, start lining up your renters, and then go get underwritten for your new mortgage.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice, great. Real quick, we're at our 3 minutes, but why not do that? Like, what are is there any obvious reason not to do that if you can?
Not to retain the existing property and buy the new one?
Like, if you can offset the mortgage by the rent effectively, so you're not adding more payments, at the very worst case scenario, they even out. So your old mortgage you're keeping, but then you offset it with the rent you're getting, or close. Why not do that?
Yeah, just different people have different risk tolerances, right? And different, also just appetites for real estate as an investment, because you got to manage the real estate. You've got the risk associated with damage to the property. You've got the risk associated with renters, getting into the property, and you've definitely heard horror stories, and so. Rental, I think you can certainly be a real estate investor prudently and take precautions and minimize those exposures. You can never minimize, you can never eliminate the exposure of, different elements of owning real estate, right? Property values go down, rental values go down. Those are risks, but I think generally they go up. Yeah. And so, I think that's not a bad approach. The other main impact there is, a lot of times when you're buying a new house, people use the equity of the old house in order to invest in the new house, and that can be the biggest challenge. Is that you're leaving that equity parked in that house, and it's hard to get to. So that can be the biggest challenge. But
there are solutions of maybe refinance that and use some of that equity
potentially, but by the time you're ready to do that, well, that's also no longer going to be a primary residence, right? If you refinance this property, you have to say you're going to occupy it as a primary for a year. Otherwise, you're refinancing it as an investment property, and that's likely going to drive your cost of money significantly up.
Then it gets less practical.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So,
great. Well, more to talk about there, but it's helpful for now. Let's shift over to our work question, which is working from home, the challenges of working from home. A lot of people, obviously, a lot more people are doing that now. We both do that to an extent. His office is at home, and I spend some time working from home. Mostly in the mornings, which is, I would say, is the most challenging part to work from home, as opposed to if you're working in the office in the morning and then at home in the evening, for various reasons. But there's challenges to doing that well, and I know a lot of people are working through those either consciously or those challenges are going on and you haven't found a way to address them. So we want to just talk about some of our challenges that we faced and find out ways to make those victories and make those positive things, and hopefully if there's any specifics of those that anyone else out there is battling with right now too, those will be helpful to hear. We can open it up in general. Dad, what was your timeline of working from home? Why did you start doing that? Why did you shift to working at home?
So I started, I had my own company, started Cleveland Street Mortgage in '99. Then after the crash, In 2010, I wound down Cleveland Street. It was hard to be small and independent. And I joined the mortgage banking side. And really, as a 100% commission loan officer whose entire equipment repertoire is right here, there's been an element for a very long time, ever since the laptop became kind of the central work equipment, where
you're pretty mobile.
You're pretty mobile wherever you go, working in coffee shops, working at home. So there was an element of that always. That I was always had my laptop at home. Even when I had a full office, I could work from home and did that. But it really wasn't until I decided to get back into the wholesale side of the business. So I was out of the wholesale side in the mortgage banking side from 2010 to 2019, and really the wholesale channel came back super strong.
Mm-hmm.
Some really great players out there creating great platforms that small independent people can now really thrive and compete and excel. And so I jumped back in first with a different company in February of 2019. And they were fully distributed, what they call, distributed company, where there was no central office. Everybody worked from their home. And so that was kind of the beginning of it for me. But I really wasn't there for very long, because I pretty quickly realized that the cost of working for somebody else far exceeded the benefits of working for somebody else. When I had run my own company before, I'm a CPA, I was comfortable with all the taxes and the business aspects of it. And so it just became obvious that there is very little value to working for somebody else when I can do all this on my own and charge less and earn more. And that was, and so at that point, I had seen the light of, you don't need an office.
Right.
I do need an office, and that's something I think I will point out is, I do think you need it. I mean, it's fine. I'm sure some people work out of their bedroom, out of their kitchen, whatever, and do what works for you. But I definitely needed an office, and so we did spend some money at home making an office in the home, but separate and distinct and very office-y. So that's another word for professional.
It's good space. So as you've done that, I mean, and part of that, it's hard to distinguish the self-employed side of it, the self-managing side from the working from home side, because sometimes those kind of blur together.
Yeah, very much true.
But so some of these things might be true of everyone that works from home, and then some of them might be more true of less managed, people who have less oversight.
True.
So you could still have work from home but have a lot of oversight, and that's just not the nature of your job. That's not the nature of what I do. But that's probably where we're going to take it. So have there been any for me, there's been some very obvious challenges. Some very, very standout, okay, I need to battle this, I need to work with this, because that's a challenge that I wouldn't have if I was in an office with other people. I'll get to those. Anything that stands out right away for you, the very obvious ones that come to mind?
It is interesting. This is I think particular to sales. When you're in sales, there's always a level of discomfort when you're calling on people, right? One of the things people talk about in sales is get comfortable being uncomfortable. If you're going to be in sales, if you're going to be calling on people, it's uncomfortable, and you need to get comfortable being uncomfortable, and being in the home, there's a heightened sense of that discomfort. And I like it.
You mean around other people, around
other
family?
people, and I kind of relate it to when Jesus was talking about it, says, he was in his hometown, and they were saying, where did this wisdom come from? What are these remarkable miracles he's performing? Isn't this the carpenter? People know you, and they know you in this mundane sense, and so then you try and do something great, and Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his own town, among his relatives, and in his own home. And he could not do any miracles there except these things that he did. And I think that's very relevant to one of the biggest challenges for me is that that you kind of get that imposter syndrome where you feel like hey, these people know me. They know the real me, and I'm, in a sense, when you're selling, you're kind of trying to transcend the real you, and so there's an extra level of consciousness there. And not that I'm disrespected in my home at all, but that sense that you feel. So I think that's one of the things you have to overcome.
Yeah, completely. Something you said there caught my attention. When you're selling, you have to kind of transcend the real you. Is that a good thing? Is that something?
Yeah.
Or is that like, to me that's kind of like, well, maybe that means you're selling wrong.
Yeah.
It's kind of my instinct, but I mean, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
No, that's a great point. No, I'm glad you called that out.
Yeah.
Because in this this age of sort of authenticity is everything, right? And so no, I don't in any way mean be inauthentic. Tell lies or deceive. But you have to transcend those limitations you feel. You have to get beyond those limitations you feel. You're just your own sort of self-awareness and self-consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You have to transcend that in order to make those calls and get those no's. And there's just a heightened sense of that awkwardness.
Yeah.
When there's people out there that know you really well that are hearing you feel awkward, be awkward and being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And you don't want them to see that.
Yeah.
You don't want so yeah. No, that's good. Good call out.
Yeah. No, I hadn't thought of that one. That one makes a lot of sense. And I haven't put a lot of thought into that. But looking back at there's I don't know. I think of it like on even creating videos, things like that. I've heard you create videos for a long time in the house, and never thought you would have felt that at all. But because then I'll go and make a video, and I feel that if someone's listening, I'm like, I would put this on YouTube, but I feel weird with my wife listening. I'm more self-conscious in the real actual making of the video. So yeah, it's interesting. So in terms of overcoming that, it's just embracing, in a sense, humility, honesty. What?
Well, I think that
and the discomfort.
Yeah. So I think So on the one hand, it's strengthened you in a sense because get comfortable being uncomfortable. Yeah. That heightens that sense of discomfort, and in a way, it exercises a muscle that needs to be exercised. In that you have to be willing to be uncomfortable in order to do sales like that. Yeah. But I think another much more sort of pragmatic thing is just to talk to those people in your life and just say, hey, I just want you to know that I feel awkward doing this, and because I'm just self-conscious of the fact that you're there and you're hearing me feel awkward doing this, and so I'm just telling you that so I feel better about it when I'm doing it. So I think that can help.
Yeah.
I think that can help, and hopefully we all have very supportive environments at home. I know you do. I know I do. And ultimately, those things aren't what they feel like in the moment.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it's probably just some deeper self-consciousness that's a little deeper rooted. That is the deeper problem. But yeah, that's a great point. Well, it's top of mind for me. I mentioned this to you before we started recording, is when one of the main challenges I have is, I mean, this is always something, no matter what, is getting up at my alarm clock. We talked about it before on a different episode. But when you have structure and meetings and accountability in terms of people know when you're at work, then you have to get up, or if you don't, then you're gonna have to skip other things in your morning routine and morning process, and you can just kind of push back your start time if you don't have anything scheduled, if you don't have an office, and so that's a challenge for me. And as I was thinking through this topic ahead of time, a quick solution came to my mind that I want to implement is just start every day with some sort of scheduled meeting, and it could, the point of the meeting is to have a meeting, so it could be very quick, and you can get value out of those. You can set it up so that it's a valuable use of time as well. But I think that's a tool I'm going to start using, is just scheduling meetings when I want to start my day. there's things that are that in between starting, like listening to podcasts that are, it's work related, like listening to, getting some education, some update on what's going on, and so, there's always going to be a little bit of blurred line, but I want to have a general start time of when I want to get into work, sit down and work mode, and start scheduling meetings then. So you up for some meetings in the morning?
Yeah.
Scheduling some meetings?
Yeah.
So that was one thing that stuck out to me, jumped out right away. Any others that you had thought through ahead of time?
Any other just general?
General, other general challenges and.
Yeah, so these are all. It's all going to vary depending on your circumstance, right?
Right.
There's a lot of circumstances that could impact, So one of the things that you brought up, which I think was really good, is when you are trying to cultivate culture, right?
Right.
You're trying to create a culture or participate in the work culture, right? Unless you're completely self-employed and completely independent and just a sole operator, which some people do. I've known CPAs like that. They're a one-man shop. That's all they do. I've been a one-man shop. But anytime you go beyond that one-man shop, if you're working from home and you're distributed, that does become a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
How do you create that? How do you create that culture? And we are pretty young in terms of growing beyond me, the one-man shop. We're still only less than a year kind of into that. And so one of the things we're trying to do, we are bringing our weekly sales meeting here to this office so that we're in person. We've been doing that.
Subleasing from a friend around here. So.
Yeah, so we've been doing that we've been meeting on Teams, and that's been good. I mean, those are certainly helpful, but I am definitely a big believer in person. And then we're also trying to schedule at least one activity a month, one just fun team building activity, just go out to dinner or go do an event, do some sort of an activity that we enjoy doing together. We're having a client appreciation party this month, where we're all come together and do that. So I think that's pretty important, is to have those sorts of activities, because otherwise, really if you're only interacting when you have specific need, business need that requires you to interact one-on-one or with specific individuals, then I think you're just never really going to generate that sort of sense of community that you want to have. No matter what your business, I think it's important that you feel like you are part of the group with one another. That we're not all these atoms that are just bouncing off each other, happen to be in the same company.
We've done one of those in-person meetings so far, and I just think it creates belief in the company and a sense of company identity, and that adds motivation for me as an employee. It's not my company, but it begins to feel a little bit more like I'm a part of it, and that like I genuinely feel ownership for the company because it's a sense of who our group is, and a sense of kind of identity as a company adds motivation for me, and belief in our company. I think that's been valuable just in that one meeting so far. So I'm excited to continue those.
Yeah, definitely. To me, it strengthens that sense of collaboration. Also, because if you know Bridget, she's an employee. You've met her before, you've emailed with her or chatted with her on Teams. But it's really sitting in the same room together that a lot of that interpersonal connection happens, and that deeper knowing of people happens, right? And I think it's that deeper knowing that creates company culture and like you said, creates much deeper investment in the company mission. And so,
let's keep moving. One more that I thought of, and I'm curious on your thoughts on this, because I don't really have a solution. I just have the challenge, is time management and scheduling, but I would frame it mostly as time management, in the sense that there's things that I can spend my time doing, and again, this is probably another that's partially working from home and partially supervision, how much supervision you have, or management over you have. But yeah, there are so many things that I can spend a long time on, and it's good for me to, the more I do it, the better it is. But it comes at the cost of doing all the other things that I need to do in a timely manner. Video editing is I do a decent amount of that right now, and you can, I was just talking with someone else about writing a paper. You can spend, it's never done. You can spend as long as you want on writing a paper. You can spend as long as you want on video editing. And it's always going to get better and better in a sense. And so setting up kind of deadlines for myself is something I want to work towards, but I'm not sure how to do that. So have you faced that challenge of time management with projects that you've had, things that you've done, and how have you worked with that to overcome that challenge?
Yeah, I think, so I'm not speaking from a position of great strength here.
Yeah.
But I am speaking from a position of, I've been around the industry enough and been around coaches enough that a fairly common way to address that is blocking.
Yeah.
Time blocking, and I think that's very, very effective. Because
I've set up schedules for myself twice,
Yeah.
and then once I've had to keep to it, I'm like, nah, that schedule wasn't made well. I've in a sense tried that, and one of them was definitely just unrealistic and bad.
Right.
The next I just haven't kept to, I think. So, in terms of time blocking, how do you then actually do it?
Yeah, so I think that's pretty easy. And again, I'm not speaking from strength, but of knowledge, I think.
Yeah.
And I think all of our schedules, all of our processes are always in a constant state of being reevaluated and revised. So the fact that it's not great or perfect, isn't a reason not to do it.
Yeah.
So I think the way you do it is you.
Do it.
Well, no, yes, but you set a penalty for yourself.
Yeah.
That's painful, right?
Yeah.
So you say, look, here's my time block for this week, and it's important enough for me that if I don't hit this time block, I'm going to pay $100 to whatever you pick, whatever you want.
Yeah.
I'm going to go take my cousins out for a $100 dinner, my nephews and nieces out for a $100 dinner, or I'm going to donate $100 to this cause, or make it painful.
Yeah.
Make it painful.
Yeah.
So that, and then stick to it. It's kind of like right now I'm trying to graze less. That's one of the challenges of being at home, right? Food's everywhere.
Yeah.
You go to the bathroom, you walk past the pantry.
Yeah.
That's a problem, right? And so I want to graze less. Because I don't want to blow up by being at home.
Yeah.
And so that's something where I've set penalties for myself, saying, okay, if I eat outside of the scheduled times that I'm supposed to be doing, then I have to drink 8 ounces of water along with it every time. So it's just something little like that.
Yeah.
But even just the thought of that, when I go, wait, I have to, even though I know I could, and it wouldn't be that big of a deal. It's like
extra time.
It's a pause.
Yeah.
So I really think that's worked, and then set a schedule, set a penalty for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, it's going to make you, more realistic about that schedule.
Yeah.
But then it'll certainly make you more attentive to that schedule, and then if you come up with a lame excuse halfway through the week, it's like, this wasn't that well thought out. You're still going to do it because you've already agreed.
Right. Yeah.
That,
and then you can go back and revise.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think then it forces you to say, okay, next week I want a better schedule.
Mm-hmm.
I want a better time block schedule next week, and so it has that double benefit of making you do what you say you're going to do, but also making you give more forethought into what you plan to do, and then more preparation in doing it. Because sometimes it's just, I'm gonna spend so much time every week learning new stuff. Well, if you wait till the day when you're supposed to learn something, then you're kind of, just grasping for, okay, what should I learn right now? Versus, no, over the weekend I'm going to develop a schedule for next week, and on this day I'm going to watch this class, or I'm going to do this thing. Yeah. So I think those things can be super helpful, and I'm going to adopt some of that.
Yeah, that's good.
You might be the beneficiary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I like it. Yeah. Yeah, did we miss any main things you had thought about ahead of time? Main obvious challenges for you, or?
I think one of the challenges, and again, this is very situational. This is, if you're a a tech person who does code, and you really are interacting with people face to face, or need to have people come to your office, then this won't apply. But one of the challenges is just safety and security, right? And that's both for you and for your clients, right? So most office contexts I've been in over the years, almost every office I've been in has a relight, has a window, right? And that's those are there for a reason, because you didn't want to be closed in behind closed doors where nobody could see in there, right? Because we all know all the unwanted sexual advances and that kind of thing that goes on in the workplace. Well, that can be true of your home office as well, and maybe even doubly so. If you're bringing people into your home, so whether you're a male or female or either way, I think there's some risks there. And so I think you just have to plan around that, to make sure that, just like we have those relights in offices where there's always visibility into that, you want to make sure that there's always visibility. Now if you live alone and that's what you've got, that's more difficult to do.
Yeah.
But I do think that's a challenge, and that's something to be planned around, to be overcome. Just plan to have visibility so that you're not making your clients uncomfortable, and you're not being put in a vulnerable position either.
Right.
So I think those things are.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, and then the other obvious one is just drawing lines and knowing when to stop. When there are jobs you can bring home anyways, but especially when you work from home, it is more difficult to know when to stop and that's an asset in that you have that flexibility, and you're able to take a pause during the afternoon, resume in the evening if that works out well. But it is also a challenge, and I think just for the sake of the people around you, for the sake of your family, a simple thing that I want to start doing more is just actually putting stuff away a little bit, just actually getting the computer out of the room, keeping my phone out of the room, and on silent if we need to during certain hours. And that's an obvious challenge, and obviously work-life balance is a huge conversation right now. You always hear that, and I don't really like that phrasing. It's just kind of a side note, because it's like they're two separate things, and and that's the whole point of this podcast is work is a wonderful part of our life, and not a alternative to enjoying life. Kind of two different directions there. I think they can be unified a lot more, but there is that challenge of that shouldn't be the only part of your life, which I know you've dealt with over the years as well. Yeah,
no. Is that a question?
I don't know if you have any added thoughts on that, but
Yeah, no, I definitely can't say I've done that well in terms of separating that. And part of our business, one of our colleagues in the business has a famous phrase. I'll omit the colorful language he uses, but answer the blank phone. Answer the phone, stupid. And his point though is that too many times we're not answering the phone, and we think, it's such and such time, or it doesn't looks like spam, or so there's
especially in a business where it's time related, and clients where the first person they can connect with is the first person they're going to go with.
Right. And where we're selling, and where our clients' availability typically happens after they get done with work.
A
lot of times, and so there's an element of that, and there's trade-offs involved in that. So I think at one level you just have to accept that there's trade-offs in having all that flexibility, during the regular work hours, and that kind of speaks to your early need for discipline and need for structure, so that you're making good use of that time, but also knowing there's a ton of flexibility around that time, where you can do things that you couldn't do if you were working in a desk job and you had to be there all the time. But the other side of that is you still do need to be present with your family, with your loved ones, with whoever you're engaged with in community. And so I do think that's super valuable to say, okay, there's certain times, and if you do that, I think most people understand. I think where I think in our business, you probably don't want to have a situation where you're just turning it off at 5 o'clock and you're not going
Right.
to pick it up again till 8 o'clock
Yeah.
in the morning, because sometimes people have needs that are urgent and you want to be able to respond to that. But I think you can block out some of that time
Yeah.
and just communicate that, voicemail or whatever. Just say, hey, these are my blockout times. I will be reviewing voicemails later if you plan to do something like that. But I think that's super valuable, and without having to do that, dinner times and those kind of things, you can just set it all aside. So it's not, you don't have to, we're not emergency room doctors,
Right.
Nobody's
Right.
going to die if they don't get our call in an hour.
Yeah.
So, I love working from home.
Yeah.
I think the benefits, far outweigh, the detriments, and so, definitely would encourage that for anybody who has the opportunity to do so and wants to do so.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for listening. We will be posting us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, so you can listen on any of those. Thanks so much for listening.